Hey there, and welcome to today's live stream. This is Erica from Ever Educating, in case you are new to this channel. And since the fall semester is coming up really soon, I wanted to come on here and if there's anybody on the live stream, answer some questions that you might have about teaching in the new semester. I know I announced live stream pretty late, so I do also have some notes of things that I can share as well. So we're going to wait a couple minutes here to see if anybody has any questions. If you do, you can feel free and submit them in the chat so I can see them. I have it open over here on my right. So that's part one. If you have any questions about teaching, about lesson planning, any worries that you want to share and get some advice on, go ahead and ask. And then I will go ahead and start with some resources that might be helpful for you if you are new to teaching college courses. Though if you're teaching like lower years, feel free to ask about that as well. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and show you a few resources. So to begin, this is my website. And if you go to it, evereducating.com, I have this tab here called Resource Library. And if you click the actual tab, it will show you the resource library, which you have to sign in with a password. It is password protected. So if you're interested in getting access to it, this sign up page is right here. And that will just be that you're signing up for my newsletter, which at this point is about a quarterly newsletter where I share some resources, what's going on, new things I've posted, things I found that might be of interest to you. So you also get access, again, to this library. So that's where you find that in case you're interested. But one thing I wanted to point out is the larger resources that I have on here. One of them is called Successful Start, Designing Your First Week of Class. And so I created this workbook. It's about 60 or so pages, and it is designed for designing your first week. So if you're completely new to instructional design, then this is where you can go, and it starts talking to you about, creating the syllabus, figuring out your major assignments, what icebreakers you're going to use, and so on. So that's something that I recommend. Kind of just opening it up here. You can see the document. So 70 pages because there's some note pages at the end here. And I kind of go through exactly what you find in it. So the 5 elements, the syllabus, the course schedule, icebreakers, major assignment sheets, and then the student self-assessment. One thing you'll find that along with the workbook, I have a video series attached to each of these elements and a blog post series attached to each of these elements as well. So this is my most comprehensive free resources that I have. So if you're, again, completely new to teaching, then I recommend signing up so that you can go ahead and get access to this. And then if you go to my YouTube channel, one thing to notice, this is the main page. If you scroll down here is the Successful Start series, so the videos right here. But I also have these 3 playlists, and basically I have over 250 videos currently on my channel. And so I organize them into ones to watch before the semester begins, early on in the semester, and then later or after the semester ends. So, of course, I recommend that you watch the ones for before the semester, since at this point in time, obviously, we're very close to the start of the fall semester. So this is what it will open up if you click that playlist. So just kind of show you a few types of videos on here, what to do the day before the first day of class, the first day, some teaching essentials, affirmations reflecting on a new semester, lesson planning tips. So rules to live by as a college instructor. Really, the sky's the limit here. So these are the ones I recommend seeing first if you are brand new potentially to this channel or you've only seen a few of my videos. So that definitely I recommend. If we go back here to my main homepage, obviously the ones early on in the semester will become very important imminently. So you can obviously peruse those as well to see if anything strikes your fancy. And then I have other playlists that are available. So if you're looking for icebreaker ideas, I have a playlist of 7 videos with different icebreakers. We'll talk a bit more about that later on, in today's live stream. Then I have some specific class assignment ideas in case you are looking for new assignments. Along those lines, I have a playlist called Assignment Jumpstart and Major Assignments. And that goes like, I have a video series that I created this summer of 12 videos, all of which focus on a major assignment, what exactly it is, the pros and cons of it, how to follow up once the assignment is done. So I do have a lot on here to watch. So I would recommend you spending some time perusing, again, if you're new to teaching, or if you're just looking for some new ideas and inspiration. I have my blog as well, though that I don't post to as often anymore because of the channel. But I do have, I believe, around 70 or so blog posts that are also relevant to teaching as well. So you can check those out too, again, at evereducating.com. And then before I just move to just me on the screen here, one tool that I really recommend, I recently had a video about Canva and some productive procrastination activities that you can do on there. I do recommend this for teachers because there's just so many templates of different genres of things you can create for your students. So one that I particularly favor is looking up infographics. Let me go ahead and click that there, right? And so this is a great tool for creating various resources for your students. And so I do have a referral link in the description below. If you sign up using it, I get $1 credit basically. But this is just one tool I wanted to point out. Though again, on my videos, I have a lot of ed tech tutorials of tools like Pear Deck, Flippity, Flipgrid, etc. So let me go ahead and close that out and shift to just me on the screen. So, all right. So I can see that there are currently no questions in the chat. So again, if you do have any, you can let me know. But I thought I'd just share a bit of overview, like my thoughts of, again, someone who's completely new to teaching, some things to consider before that day one hits. And then and then going through the semester as well, some things to consider during different parts of the term. So to begin, what you want to really think about is week one, of course, right? Before the semester begins. And there's 3 elements to that I want to focus on first. And so the first is, how are students going to get to know you? So are you going to do just like a little intro? Hey, I'm Erica. I have my PhD in English. My research area was children's and adult literature. I've been teaching for, so kind of an intro and that's it. Then we move on. Or do you want to have, more of a plan for how you present yourself, right? So you're going to have the intro, but then maybe you're going to have like, hey, like, let's kind of discuss. And why don't you tell me a bit about yourself? And like, are you going to have that kind of casual persona? Are you someone who wants to have a more formal, I'm the instructor, you are the student persona? Do you want to have, conversations about expectations for student behavior in your classroom? So just getting a sense of how you want to present yourself to your students, starting day one. So you have that plan in place, and then obviously you implement it when day one arrives. Now, on a similar vein, how do you want your students to get to know each other? So this obviously is usually icebreakers, but what icebreakers do you want to use? You're gonna have more than one? If so, do you have, different like types of icebreakers, like one where it's like verbal, one where there's movement, one where they're writing things down? What exactly do you want to do with students so that they can start getting to know each other? And then third, how are you going to start getting to know them? Again, this could be icebreakers, but it could potentially also be just discussions. So maybe you want to know about their current understanding of your course concept. So you're going to ask them questions about like, hey, what's your knowledge about X? What do you know about Y? What are your thoughts about Z, right? Or it might be some kind of activity. So again, in that workbook, that 5th element is a student self-assessment. I did this with students so I can get a writing sample right off the bat, right? So I gave them basically a short story and I asked them to write a short literary analysis of that short story because I wanted to get a writing sample to see, like, do they understand what literary analysis is? Did they actually understand the story? How does their writing flow? Did they create an argument or are they exploring instead? So just getting a sense of who they are as writers. So I know, okay, of my batch of 30 students, 20 of them had really strong writing samples. 5 of them were pretty good too. And then 5 of them, like, there was no punctuation. They were very confused about the storyline. They just kind of wrote a book summary rather than an analysis. So getting a sense of the demographics, like the skill level of your current of your students currently. So these are all things to consider, right? How are they going to get to know you? How are they going to get to know each other? How are you going to get to know them? So definitely plan out how you're going to approach that before the semester begins, because that's something that usually happens during week one. Now, kind of going off from that, something that also happens during week one is going over the syllabus. And there tends to be different modes of thought when it comes to syllabi in the first week. So some instructors go literally line by line, reading every single word off the syllabus. Some give it to students and say, it's your responsibility to read it. We're moving on to other things. And some do a happy in between, right? A happy medium. I tended to be someone who did the happy medium. I didn't read everything letter by letter, but I did go through the whole thing. But you kind of want to get a sense of, that whole like cliche, it's on the syllabus, right? Where you get students asking you questions constantly and all the answers are on the syllabus if they actually read it. So you want to get a sense of, do you really want to go full force on going over the whole thing? Are you going to do some kind of ungraded or graded like syllabus quiz at the end of the week? Are you going to do like a scavenger hunt where you have a list of questions and students have to find the answers in the syllabus? So really get a sense of how much you want to go into detail when it comes to that document during the first week. And again, personally, I think the more the better, but it depends. Like maybe you have a really stacked full course and you really have to get started on content as soon as possible. So maybe you just want to do a quick icebreaker and then go straight into content. But I do think some thought of, okay, well, how am I going to approach syllabus sharing is a good idea before the semester begins too. In a similar vein, the LMS that you're using, so whether you're teaching in person or online, you likely have a learning management system that you are using as part of the course. If you're teaching in person, maybe you don't use it much, but maybe you use it a lot. I know I did when I taught in person. So getting a sense of, of that, like, are you teaching freshmen? Are they new to the LMS? Do you have to teach them how it works, how to navigate to the assignments, how to navigate to the discussion forum, how to navigate to the course materials that are digital? Get a sense of that as well, of, is that just going to be you introducing the LMS to them? Or do you want to make it a game? Is one of the icebreakers scavenger hunting with a partner to find different pieces of information on their LMS because they have laptops in the classroom? So that was another one too. So the syllabus, how much detail you're going into there, and also the LMS, how much detail you're going into there about these tools. Now, something to consider, I'm someone who is very digital in nature, hence having a YouTube channel. I created video recordings of hey, here's how to navigate the LMS. Hey, here's me going over the syllabus. So even though I went over the syllabus in person, they also had a video of me going over the syllabus, in more detail. And same with the LMS. I showed some basics in person, so I can ask if they had any questions because I taught freshmen mainly. But then I also had a video, hey, here's where you find the important stuff in this LMS. You go here for this one, you go there for this one. And then I just had those two videos linked at the top of my LMS, right? So that's something to consider as well. If you're someone who is pretty techie or at least have the ability to screen record, then you could potentially have pre-recorded videos about those things. So you don't need to go over it in detail in class if you don't want to, or you feel your time is better spent elsewhere. Again, if you do that, if you just do the videos, I definitely recommend some kind of quiz to make sure that there's a reason for them to actually watch them, other than hoping that they actually want to watch them, right? There's some who it's not that important, I'll figure it out. For those, you want to potentially have a quiz to entice them to take part and watch the videos. So that's some things, week one to consider. A few other things is, again, are you going to go straight to your content, or is week one only going to be introductions, icebreakers, community building? So this is going to be key to lesson planning, figuring out, okay, do I have enough time to devote the whole first week to just getting to know each other, getting settled in? Or if you're teaching 2 days a week, is day one the intro, community building, but then day two is already course material? Or if you're teaching 3 days a week, again, what's that divide? Is it 2 days of intro, 1 day of content? Is it 1-2 divide? Or really, are you starting from day one? So what format are you going for in your course? Getting a sense of that. And then also, if you are someone who wants to start like really fast on the course content, then something to ask day one, potentially when you're going through the syllabus, is do they have access to all the course materials? Because if you have maybe a couple textbooks or more, do they already have it, right? Have they gone to the bookstore and picked up these books? Did they get it from Amazon or whatever? Like you might want to take, a poll, like, okay, how many do you have the textbook? And if only 10 of your 30 raise their hand and you planned on assigning for homework reading the first two chapters of this textbooks, obviously that's an issue. So that's, for me, one of the reasons I tended to have a pretty intro-y week during the first week, because I wanted them to have time to pick up that first piece of material. Though in my case, my first few weeks were all digital materials anyways that were free online. The first novel wasn't until like week 3 or 4. But in your case, maybe you have a textbook that you need by week 2, but expecting it by day 1 might be a little unrealistic. So I do think just asking them, hey, who has access to this? Are you having trouble accessing it? What is the issue? Like to see potentially if you could help or not. Getting a sense of them accessing the course materials. If you're someone who does a lot of digital stuff instead, like it's just digital PDFs and everything, or digital ebooks, you might want to get a sense of, Wi-Fi amongst your students. So are they going to be able to access all of your course materials? So this might be something that you ask more, privately, rather than asking, hey, does anybody not have access to Wi-Fi at home? You might have some kind of like, hey, answer a few questions for me. And it could just be various questions depending on what you want to ask. Hey, do you want to go by a nickname? What are your preferred pronouns? Et cetera, et cetera. And you might have, hey, we're going to be using Wi-Fi a lot or internet a lot in this course. Do you foresee any, issues with that? Please let me know, right? So that's another one too, if your materials are very digital in nature. And then kind of in a similar vein, asking questions week 1, I think is very important to get to know your students and get to know their circumstances. So potentially you might ask for some questions that are better off being anonymous, the answers. So, because you want to get honest answers, forthright questions from your students. If you're asking them, hey, you have any questions? And maybe they're not comfortable sharing. If you do something anonymous, like with Pear Deck or with an index card, a physical index card, then you can ask them, hey, anything confusing you? Or, hey, what's your biggest worry about this course? Or, what are you most excited about? And you can get some anonymous feedback and know that going forward. So I'd recommend doing this. And again, I do think Pear Deck is your best bet. I have a tutorial that I can add to this description, after this live stream finishes. But basically, it's like you see the question on the screen, and then they type in their answer on their phone or their laptop or whatever, and then the answers populate. And again, it's anonymous because they don't need to be signed in. They can be if you want it to be attached to their name, using their Gmail account, but it could be anonymous, which is what, how I tend to approach using that particular tool. So that's some first week things. Now, let me make sure there's no questions. Okay. So the first few weeks ideas that I, thought I'd share on here. The first is testing out different class period designs. So I have a couple videos on this, one about structuring the class and one on plug and play lesson planning. And again, I'll add those on the bottom here later on. But basically the idea here is trying different designs. So trying whole class discussions, lecture and then discussion afterward, small group activities, think, pair, share, individual work that's written down, presentations, just having different designs of your class periods and getting a sense for what's working best for these particular students. So maybe you're teaching 4 sections, 2 thrive on small group activities, 1 thrive on whole class discussions, and the last thrives on individual activities, right? Maybe you don't want to design all of them differently. It's a lot of work, obviously, but maybe you are willing to do that differentiation. Or just kind of getting a sense of, okay, this type is the best one. I'm going to go forward and use this one anytime I'm not sure what to do. This is my default. So doing some experimenting with students and getting a sense of what works best in your classroom. Now, you can also ask for feedback. So maybe you're, 3 weeks in and you've had a few different class periods designed different ways, maybe just pause and have a discussion. Hey, we've been doing small group activities and lectures and whole class discussions and yada yada. I'm curious, like, which ones did you feel were the most helpful to you? Did you enjoy the most? Which ones did you not feel worked very well? Why? And just have a quick discussion, ask for some feedback, and then potentially tweak accordingly. So asking students for feedback, I feel, is beneficial. And I'm going to get to that a little later too. But this is something that you can do again after a few weeks to get a sense of how students are feeling about the course content. And again, maybe do some anonymous stuff with Pear Deck. What's confusing you the most about the course content? What are you most interested in learning more about? What do you wish we had more time for that we passed, through too quickly? What do you feel like we're spending too much time on that you think, you understand and would rather move on to something else, right? So getting some feedback, potentially maybe at the end of each week, and it's a quick, like, best thing about the week, worst thing about the week, or maybe just every few weeks, ask your students for feedback. And then also getting a sense of student knowledge and skills and interest in the first few weeks are obviously going to be very key. So if you don't do that first week student assessment activity where you get a sample of their work, then I recommend doing small activities during the first few weeks where you can get some samples. So this might be a group activity where they have to write something down so you can collect it, or it might be an individual activity where they have to, again, create something so you can collect it. And these can be ungraded things. They don't have to be things that you get feedback on necessarily, but it's just to get a sense of where your students at during these first few weeks. What do they need more support with? What are they understanding quite clearly? And you can, check that off the list as being successful. Then in a similar vein, your first major assignment, right? So this might be usually my first major assignment was due around week 5 or so. But kind of having a sense there of maybe the deadline has to be tweaked. You thought it'd be a very quick 3-week assignment, but turns out you're 2 weeks in and it's very clear they're not going to be able to turn in a strong project unless you give them more time. So you have to look at the rest of your learning, the rest of your lesson planning, the rest of your course schedule. Can you make that tweak? Maybe push deadline back a week. Now's the time to do it, I feel, during the first assignment versus doing it later on, because as you get also later in the semester, there's less time to spare. So something to consider, like, is the first assignment going as planned, or should you tweak that deadline a little bit? And then also during this activity, I really recommend doing formative and summative assessment feedback for them. So it's not just, all right, we're talking about this activity and you're doing your own thing, and then you turn in the last day and now I'm grading it. And I've seen nothing before this point in time. Like, I really recommend formative feedback during project 1. Hey, turn in this small piece, at the end this week. Hey, share this thing with me during this class discussion. I'll give you some feedback. Hey, turn in this part, so you kind of just get a sense of your students' progress so you can give feedback. Like, the first assignment is a paper that has to be an argument about this book, and you haven't made an argument. You're just exploring a theme, right? What's your argument about the theme? Let's talk about this. Let's create one together, right? So that can be seen by asking them for their thesis statement, right? So maybe at the end of week 1 of this project, you have them submit literally 1 sentence. What's your thesis? And then from there, you can give them feedback. Hey, this isn't an argument. It's exploratory. Let's discuss how to make it an argument. Hey, this is an argument, but there's no way you can actually support it well in 5 pages. This would take 20. How can we narrow it down? Hey, I think this argument will be hard to support. We should discuss about where you're seeing evidence of this, because I'm not sure there's enough there for a 5-page paper. And then maybe down the line, hey, submit your outline so I can get a sense of the flow of your paper, your plan for the paper. You go further in. Okay, hey, why don't you submit like 1 paragraph, a body paragraph where you're doing some analysis? I can give you feedback on that. So just getting formative feedback to them so they can have a strong showing at the end of that first assignment. Really recommend that too. And then once the assignment ends, I'm someone who's a big believer in follow-up. So rather than just being like, okay, let's move on to the next assignment, potentially have a discussion, during class. Hey, I read your 30 research papers, and I noticed some patterns. I noticed many of you chose this type of topic to talk about. I noticed that a lot of you had a bit of an issue where you weren't including topic sentences at the beginning of each paragraph. I noticed that there was a lot of opinions, but you weren't doing much close reading, right? So kind of giving a sense of, hey, what went really well? What's some things to keep an eye out? Because I noticed this, pattern in your work, and you can really improve it by shifting it to this thing instead. So just having a little follow up for students, I think will be very helpful. And then again, asking for feedback, right? After the first major project, this can be, again, a discussion or maybe something anonymous. What went well? What worries you about the first project, considering you have these 2 more projects to go in this class? How can I be more support in the next project? So again, kind of getting some feedback from your students. And then my last 2 main points before some minor ones also have to do with feedback. I recommend a midterm chat, and I have a video and a blog post about that I'll link below later on. So literally at the middle of your term, I did this through CTLT, so the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology at my school. But basically, you're asking students 4 questions where they give you feedback on your course, and so you can kind of course correct in the middle of the term, right? So it has a sense of like, hey, what's going well, what's not going well, what can you do to improve your situation, what can I do to improve the situation? And so you get this feedback anonymously, right? So like you're not there. Either you have somebody else facilitate this, or you do it potentially anonymously digitally. And in this sense, you can say, okay, so students are having this issue. I see this pattern amongst the, what's not going well. I see this pattern amongst what can I do to help out? And maybe some of these things you can't do. Maybe the feedback is, I wish there weren't reading quizzes. Okay, well, you might say, well, there need to be reading quizzes because very few of you speak up in class when you're discussing these novels. So if I worry that if there's no reading quizzes, then even fewer of you will speak up during, class. Maybe if there's more communication, more discussion in these next couple of weeks, maybe at the end of the term, we won't need reading quizzes, right? So, but then some might be like, hey, I'm confused about X thing. And you're like, oh, I wish I knew. Here are these 5 resources I created. Here's this other resource you can use. Hey, why don't we have a whole class about this topic? So I do recommend a midterm chat situation during the middle of your semester. And at the end of the semester, I created course assessments for my students to fill out. So that student eval, that's university based. So like bubble in, leave any random feedback that you have. Tended not to get much out of that. And so instead, I created a course assessment. And this could be, again, something physical or something digital, where I asked, hey, which assignments do you feel were the most valuable for your learning experience? Which ones do you think, didn't really work well? What books did you enjoy? What books did you hate? If I taught this course again and I had these 3 different assignments, which one would you say should definitely be there? And which one should you say doesn't need to be there, right? What's your feedback on how the designs of the major assignments, can be improved upon, and so on. So I really get feedback on specifics from my students so that I can improve the semester the next time around. And I feel that students appreciate that I'm asking for the feedback. Like I take you as serious people who can give me constructive criticism on the course. I want to know what you thought about how the semester went, right? This means something to me. Your thoughts mean something to me. I think it'd be a great way to end the semester, note on. And then a couple quick things. I do think if you're someone who is new to teaching a particular course, you might want to ask students about mentored text. So maybe, you have an essay assignment and you had 2 or 3 students who created like excellent pieces for it. You might ask them, hey, John, I'm going to teach this course again, in the future, and I would love to use your essay as a mentor text for students, as a sample of, what's a strong piece of writing. How do you feel about me using your essay? Is it okay to use it? If so, would you want me to include your name so you get credit, or would you rather it be like anonymous? It's just your writing, but you don't want your name attached to it. Let me know. So this is something you can do potentially after each major assignment. But if not, things can go a little chaotic, during the semester. At the end, before they leave you, don't expect an answer if you're emailing them after the semester ended. Ask them, hey, I really felt this was a strong piece of work. Can I use it in the future as a mentor text? Yes, no. If yes, do you want it to be credited or to be anonymous? And so that way you can create a little, folder on your computer, or maybe it's a physical item. Like, all right, I can use these as samples in the future. And then the semester ends, reflect, 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 right? What went well? What went poorly? What would you change? What would you not change? And then kind of organizing as well. All right, these assignments went well. Let me put this in a file called went well assignments. These assignments did not go well. Put in a folder titled don't do again. These readings went really well. These readings weren't worthwhile, right? So kind of organizing your files at the end of the semester when it's still really clear in your mind, where you're still kind of in the flow of the semester work before the break really begins. So that's in a nutshell, kind of recommendations across the whole semester. I still see no questions, which again, I anticipated because of how late I announced this live stream. But if you're watching it on the replay, I hope you found it helpful. I again will add more of these different links at the end here. But I do want to point out that if you have any questions for me that you want me to answer in a future live stream, I do have a Google form where you can submit to me specific questions that you have about teaching or about lesson planning, about instructional design, and I'd be happy to answer them in a future video, whether live stream or not. So I'll add a link to that as well to the description once this ends. I do have a one-on-one service where we can chat, one-on-one. I'll go ahead and have a link to that service as well in the description. But yeah, so I really hope you have a fantastic fall semester and that things go really well, very smoothly for you. And I'll see you hopefully next week with another video. I do want to thank you if you're a subscriber. I reached 7,000 subscribers recently this past week, and obviously that was lovely to experience. So I hope you find this video helpful. Click like if you did. And if you have not subscribed and you don't want to miss out on future tips about teaching, about instructional design, then about ed tech, then go ahead and subscribe as well. I'll see you next time.